You're exhausted. You've just finished another 8-hour shift. You collapse on the couch. You scroll your phone. You wonder where the day went. But here's a strange truth. For over 99% of human history, your ancestors worked far less than you do. And the real question isn't how they survived the elements. It's what they did with all those extra hours. Picture this. You wake up to an alarm. You drag yourself out of bed. You eat a quick breakfast. You commute. You work. You come back. You sleep. Repeat. That's the modern loop. But it's a loop that's barely 10,000 years old. Before that, for hundreds of thousands of years, life followed a very different rhythm. But first, how many hours exactly? In 1968, anthropologist Richard Lee traveled to the Kalahari Desert. He studied the Kung San people. He tracked every waking minute of their day. He found they worked just 2 to 3 hours per day. That's around 15 to 20 hours a week. For food, for shelter, for everything they needed to survive. The rest of the time, it was theirs. And these numbers weren't a fluke. Later studies of the Hadza in Tanzania found similar patterns. The Ache people of Paraguay, the Tsimane of Bolivia. Cross-culturally, foragers spend between 15 and 30 hours a week on subsistence. That leaves 30 to 40 hours of free time, every single week, for hundreds of thousands of years. So what did they do with it? They talked. They told stories. They played. They napped. They groomed each other. They invented games. They sang. They danced. And here's the thing. They weren't just killing time. They were building the very thing that made you human. You might be thinking that sounds like a permanent vacation, but it wasn't laziness. It was a different relationship with time. The Kung worked intensely for short bursts, a few hours of hunting in the morning, a few hours of gathering in the afternoon. Then they stopped. Then they rested. Then they played. That rhythm of work and rest is ancient. It's what your body still expects today. Your modern schedule? It's the aberration. And it's only about 10,000 years old. But let's look deeper. What does play actually mean in this context? For evolutionary psychologist Peter Gray, play is not trivial. Play is how children learn social rules. Play is how adults bond with peers. Play is how you practice complex motor skills without the pressure of failure. In hunter-gatherer bands, children played constantly. They didn't have schools. They didn't have homework. They had older children and adults modeling behavior. And they had hours of unstructured time every single day. That unstructured time built creativity. It built problem-solving. It built the social intelligence that allowed your ancestors to cooperate in groups of up to 150. Now, you might be asking, how do we know this wasn't just a modern-day observation of people who were already changed by the modern world? That's a fair question. But the evidence goes back further. Archaeological sites show that early humans had time for things beyond survival. In Blombos Cave, South Africa, archaeologists found 75,000-year-old ochre blocks. They were intentionally engraved with geometric patterns. Those patterns served no survival function. They were art. They were expression. They were the product of a mind with spare time. And that's just one site. So what did that accumulated free time produce over the long run? It produced language, complex grammar. It produced mythology and oral tradition. It produced the first tools. But more than that, it produced you. Because leisure is what allowed for innovation. You don't invent a bow and arrow while you're running from a lion. You invent it while you're sitting around the fire experimenting with wood and sinew, because you have the mental bandwidth to be curious. Take the bow and arrow. That invention required someone who had hours to practice, hours to experiment with different woods and strings, hours to fail and try again. That's not an invention of a starving person. That's an invention of a well-fed, well-rested person with time to kill. That curiosity is the engine of human progress. And that engine only runs when you're not exhausted. But here's the counterintuitive twist that changes everything. When agriculture arrived around 10,000 years ago, everything shifted. Farming gave you more food, but it also gave you more work, more mouths to feed, more fields to plow, more weeds to pull, more grain to store. The concept of the 40-hour work week didn't exist. It was more like the sunrise to sunset work week. Your ancestors traded their free time for calories, and they never got that free time back. The transition from foraging to farming raised the average work week from around 20 hours to over 50. And that's before the Industrial Revolution, which pushed it even higher. Specifically, the rise of agriculture brought with it not just work, but schedules. For the first time, your ancestors had to plant at a specific time. They had to harvest at a specific time. They had to store grain for the winter. They had to protect their surplus from raiders. That constant vigilance created a new kind of stress. A stress that your brain still hasn't evolved to handle. The modern 9-to-5 is a direct descendant of that agricultural anxiety. And your body knows it. Cortisol levels spike. Sleep quality drops. All because you're living a schedule that was invented in the Neolithic, not the Pleistocene. You might be thinking, but surely they must have been miserable with all that free time? Actually, studies of modern hunter-gatherer well-being show they report high levels of life satisfaction. They have lower rates of depression and anxiety than industrial populations. That's according to a 2019 study by Michael Gervin and colleagues on the Tsimane. The absence of time pressure is not boredom. It's freedom. It's the freedom to sit with your child, to tell a story, to craft a tool with care, to watch the sunset without checking your phone. Now, let's bring it back to you. You wake up. You check your email before your feet hit the floor. You eat breakfast while responding to messages. You sit at a desk for 8 hours. You come home and you feel drained. But you're not drained because you physically worked. You're drained because you've been focused on output for 10 straight hours. Your brain is screaming for a break. But you don't give it one. You scroll. You watch. You consume. You don't create. You don't play. And yet, the few hours of leisure you do have, you monetize. You optimize. You feel guilty if you're not being productive. But your ancient ancestors had no word for productivity. They had no word for time management. They had sunrise. They had sunset. And in between, they survived. And they thrived. And they laughed. And they created you. They accumulated 70,000 hours of extra free time over a lifetime compared to you. 70,000 hours to build relationships. 70,000 hours to experiment. 70,000 hours to make mistakes and try again. That's the real wealth of the Paleolithic. Not their tools. Not their bones. Their time. So here's the question that echoes. You're exhausted. You've just finished another 8-hour shift. You collapse on the couch. But now you know the strange truth. For over 99% of human history, your ancestors worked far less than you do. And they used those hours not to escape life. They used them to live it. So the next time you catch yourself scrolling in the dark, wondering where your time went, ask yourself this. What would you do with 70,000 extra hours? What would you create? What would you become? Because the answer to that question might just be the most human thing about you.